Welcome everybody to Exceptional Effort Business Sunday. I'm here with Julian White, Pete Keogh, and Ingrid is an apology. She's got a sick puppy that she's looking after, and I'm Damien Andrews. Today we're going to be talking about decisions, how to make them, how to move your business forward by making decisions. Gentlemen, how are you today?
Good. Yeah, great, thanks.
Good to hear. How important are decisions and how difficult can it be for some people to make them?
$4,000 question, isn't it? I think the first thing is, there's so many ways you can make decisions, but the real crux of the matter I've seen in running a business and working with business owners is actually making that decision. Procrastinating and umming and ahhing can be more deadly than making a wrong decision. In saying that, I'm not suggesting you rush in and make every decision in 3 minutes because someone said you've got to make a decision, but there's a balance of how you come to those decisions. And there's analytical data, there's feedback you can get from people. It really depends on the magnitude of the decision you've got to make and how impactful it's going to be in your life or in a business. So there's no perfect rule book of how to make the decision. But I think gathering information and analysing that information as quickly as possible, if in doubt, get some feedback from people around you and then make the decision.
I'm a big believer in it, adding on to what Julian just said, was that those decisions have got to come from somewhere, and unless you've got the options, you've got to collate the options and what angles can we go. So I think if you don't do the groundwork in those options, it makes the decision making very much harder. The more the work you do in the options, looking at what is the right fit, I think will make the decision easier.
Yeah, that's a very good point in that regard, is us identifying what those options are. And I find making a decision, what makes it easier from my end is being clear about the objective that you want to achieve. Because then from that perspective, you can assess what those options are against that objective. And when you do that, that makes the decision process a lot easier. So from my perspective in that regard, it's first identifying what do I really want to do. And so I choose that. And then from there, it's like, well, how do I get there? And then we go through the options of working out what is that process. And I found that works really well from a decision-making process.
I see
that makes a lot.
Sorry, Julian, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the other thing is going back to the decision making that decision. If you're leading people in a business or in any field, people look to you as a leader and they're looking for that decision. So it's almost like, being a little bit dramatic, puppies looking up to the mother puppy and they'll follow. Sorry, the puppy's looking up to their mother and they'll follow. Puppies will follow the mother around. So people are looking for leaders to make decisions. So that's really critical as well, that if you are a leader, that you're seen to be making decisions, and people will, sort of respect you for that, whether they're right or wrong. Once again, you're never going to get them 100% right, but as a leader, making decisions is also critical.
I was going to add on before with what Damien was saying, that to me, those looking at your options and then trying to work out your decision and then to understand the consequence, to me leads me back to the game of chess. There's many moves, and each piece has got their own options of which way they can move. And what is, as Damien says, what do you want? Do I want to take one of the pawns first, or do I want to go straight for the king? So as a result of each one of those options, your choice will determine your consequence.
And it's all linked together, I find. And that point that Julian raised is partly where I wanted to lead to with this show as well, is this idea of being a leader and making those decisions. One of my favorite scenes from a movie, the movie U571, it's one of my favorite inspirations as to what a leader is and to making a decision. At one point there, Matthew McConaughey turns to his crew and and the submarines are sunk. There's one left. They're on the German submarine, and it's like all the crew are looking to him as to what to do, and and as now as the captain, because the captain had died. So Matthew McConaughey he's the next in charge, and he's now the acting captain. He says to the crew, I don't know what we're going to do. And then we're down in the after that scene, we're down in the bows of the submarine. Matthew McConaughey sitting across from Harvey Keitel and his character, and he looks at him, and Harvey Keitel says, "Can I speak freely?" He says, "Yes, of course." And he says, "Don't you ever say to the crew again what you just said. I don't know." The captain is one of the most powerful people are looking up to you, wanting to know what to do. You say, "I don't know." You just kill the crew. And I really find that so important from a leadership perspective. I heard a statement once that I may be wrong, but I'm never uncertain. And this is what I find, from my experience, I've found in leading people, I get a lot of loyalty and a lot of people following what I do, because I will make the decision going, this is what we're doing. I'll do an assessment beforehand, but I will eventually make that decision, say, we're doing this. This is the situation. If it's wrong, I'll take it on board and say, look, that didn't work. Let's move in this direction. And I found from a business perspective, getting the team together, going, this is what we're doing. The first decision is we're doing this. This is the direction we're going. Now, how do we get there? And then I'll get input from the team and say, all right, what do we do? And so they'll put ideas forward as to how do we actually move forward. We'll take that on board. Everyone will discuss that and go, okay, and this is the plan we're going through. This is the plan to get there. And then as things come up, the team are on board because they've been part of that process of making the decision. They put their ideas forward. Then when something goes wrong, it's like, well, that come out of left field. So how do we deal with that? And then we go through that same process again. But I find as a leader in business, it makes a huge impact to actually make that decision with the involvement of your team.
Yep, perfectly said. And it's, that's a great example, especially in that movie and military generally. But, once you've made that decision, it's not that you kind of step back a little bit and you've made a decision. We're going from A to B. And as you just said, how do we do it? And that's where you bring everyone in. But at least they know where they're going. They know the decision's been made. Without a decision being made, it's like, chooks with their heads cut off running around. And then when you don't make a decision, anarchy starts to descend. And then it's like the snowball rolling down the hill, and you wonder why your people aren't responsive to you or showing you respect, because they don't have any for you because you can't make a decision. So it becomes a big circular argument. So it's just, and that's the difference between, good leaders and great leaders. One of the things is that they can make these decisions. But secondly, as you said, making a decision and getting it wrong is part of life. You can never try and make the perfect decision, as we've said. And if you try and do that, well, you don't make any decisions and we're back to square one. So there's a balance, and, you don't want to rush your decisions. But it's interesting, if you take the submarine example or those type of environments, sometimes you don't have time to do the necessary research or think that you'd like to do. You're on the spot, so you've got to make instant decisions. And they're probably the most difficult ones you can make. And it's either going to be right or wrong. You've got a 50-50 bet in those environments. But once again, those that know how to make those quick decisions will also thrive.
I suppose it's also the art of, as you're saying, Julian, learning on experiences as well. And if you make a bad choice, that's a mistake. But the first sign of stupidity is making that same choice again, knowing the consequence and thinking, that's going to be different this time. But I'm got to find that inner leader in me this week. Because we'll shut down over term 2 with all the schools. All the schools in term 2 want to be taken with my company in term 3, but I've got all the schools in term 3 that I'll normally take. So I'm trying to fit square pegs in round holes at the moment to fit everyone in. So I have to be smart in the way I move or suggest some schools to term 4, knowing those schools can adapt or not. Are going to be my decision I have to make the next 2 or 3 days. So that's going to be difficult. And I'm lucky I've got time. But as you said, Julian, when you haven't got time, you've got to think on the spot. That's the difficult one.
I agree with that thinking on the spot situation. If you have that decision to make, to be uncertain is worse than to make a decision that's wrong, because you can always correct a decision that's wrong. And as you were saying earlier, when people are looking to you, and if you're not making a decision, all of a sudden they're starting to go, which direction are we going? And then you get that, as Julian put, like chooks with it running around with their heads cut off. And that's the worst situation I think you can be in. If you're going in the wrong direction, you can identify that fairly quickly, because you'll get feedback going, hang on a minute, that's not working, let's deal with that. Part of that, making that instant decision, actually making a decision, buys you a bit of time as well, because people then start moving in a direction. They're not running around with their head cut off, like a chook with their head cut off. They're actually moving in a direction. Then you get from that, you actually get feedback and go, hang on a minute, maybe that's not working. Let's work through this, and that actually buys you a little bit of time. And sometimes it does mess up. That happens, quite regularly. I had a situation this week where I was actually representing someone in court because they didn't want to do it. They couldn't afford a lawyer and go through that process. So when my client, I'm representing them in court, I'm facing off against two senior barristers, and their legal argument, I must say, was probably better than mine. I'll say it was better than mine, their legal argument. But the situation in front of the judge, you could see from his face that he could understand this position as to where it was. After that had finished, and I sat down and I thought of it, and then there was two key pieces of information that I thought of after the fact. But it's like, you didn't have time to think of that at the time. Well, I didn't think of that at the time, and it was just, that's one of those situations where things happen, and you just move on and move forward. So you've just, if I had fumbled around and gone, I don't know, then the case wouldn't have been made at all. Whereas because I went bang, 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 here's the case, afterwards, there's more information, and there will always, hindsight is always 20/20, as we know. And it's a lot clearer when you make a decision to move forward than looking back and going, there's all these other options that I could have done. Well, you didn't. And that's the point. You need to do something.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I've also used in different situations, and it's not always appropriate, is that if you've got a team of people around you, and you might have some senior people there, and they're looking to you for a decision, you may have already made the decision in your head, but I've also often said to people, what would you do? What would your decision be? And they sort of sit upright and say, well, and it's a way of not so much educating, but bringing people into understanding the decision-making process. And often some of their decisions can be better or worse than what you're thinking. But once you make that, if I was to make that decision, those people are going to run with it. But if they're making the decision, then they're also, and you say, that's a great idea, let's do that. That person that's made that decision is going to own it more than if you make the decision for you. So different horses for courses, but educating people how to make decisions and letting them understand that, making a decision can sometimes be, quite difficult and put you under pressure. Instead of sometimes people sit there twiddling their thumbs thinking, wait for the decision to be made and I'll just do it. So helping people or training people how to make decisions can also be really helpful for you in an organisation structure.
I also think a very important point is how you come across before, during and after making that decision. Emotional regulation, clear mind. If your workers see that you're hassled, your employees see that you're hassled, stressed, and sometimes acting out of the realms that you should, I think employees are a little bit like children. They know when mum and dad are under stress and pressure and they're starting to crack. So to have that equilibrium or that balance of that emotional mental state is a difficult one to master.
It's a very good point, Pete. That emotional, or that congruency within yourself, that you are making that decision in alignment with what you believe is right, And getting in touch and having that skill makes a huge difference, because people do feed off that, whether they're children or adults. So, I know, like as a parent, most parents will relate to this. If you're stressed out, the children are stressed out. If you calm down, children calm down. But it's the same in a work environment as a leader. If you're constantly stressed out, then that allows, gives your employees the permission to be stressed out and freaking out and doing those kind of same things as well. So this is where it is really important to have that emotional intelligence to actually maintain that control, to stay calm, to stay focused. Because if you do that, this is a big one, a simple one I find that makes a huge difference in how organizations run, is the starting of meetings. I have a thing where if if I'm organizing a meeting, the meeting will start at that time, exactly at that time, because what that says subconsciously, it informs people that these things happen in this order, and this is the decision is that, and this is what is required. And from that, because I set the meeting and I start on time, it means that the rest of their work needs to be done in accordance with what has been said. You say I'm going to start at a certain time, and the meeting doesn't start at that time. As the leader, you're saying to people, timings don't really matter. And I found just that simple decision of going, this meeting will start on time, all meetings will start on time and finish on time. That's a big one, making it finish on time. If things have to run over, you schedule another meeting. But doing that start and finish at that time, I found unconsciously it makes a huge impact on how people approach things, because that sets in place this decision, these items are serious, and we must comply with that. And it works a treat.
Yeah, that's critical. It's just having that discipline of just meetings, often decisions that are made out of those meetings, but having that discipline to start on and finish on time, it often doesn't happen, but it sets the tone, which then also sets the tone for what I found, and I've done it myself, is that when people are looking for a decision, if you sit there and swing in your chair and go, and if you're umming and ahhing, even if you make a decision, you're seen as like it's not a solid decision, you're not sure. So how your body language and if people see that decision-making process and see doubt in you, they'll accept the decision. But if you're going to make a decision, try and avoid I'm not too sure, yeah, we could do that. I don't think out aloud. That can be, a little bit detrimental as well as starting a meeting late. It sets the culture and the tone. So you can't then blame people for adapting what you're setting.
It leads me to another point of when I used to run meetings in a large organisation. I was manager of a certain area, and I made sure that I was always in the meeting first. So my employees and other managers walked into the meeting that I was running. There would be nothing worse than if they were all in there waiting for you, and if you were late. I do a little bit of work with the police and the youth resource officers. They came to me one time and said, we're trying to engage the inmates at a youth detention place, and we want to play sport with them and have a basketball game or whatever, have a barbecue afterwards, and it's not working. I said, can you come in and have a look? So I went in, and the inmates were already on the basketball court playing shots and playing football and stuff, and then the police would come in police PE uniform, and the game would be against the prisoners. And I went, well, straight away, let's look at this differently. Next time, let me organise it. And we got there before the prisoners, so we were in the hall. We were dressed in casual PE gear. We picked one of the police officers and one of the inmates. They were captains, and then they had to pick inmate, police, so the teams were mixed. And then that game of sport, or that lesson in team mateship and stuff, was naturally happening between the police and the inmates, and they become more cohesive. So I think it's making sure you set the surroundings up in terms, in lines with that decision making process, can really have a big ripple effect.
It's a very good point, Pete, there in relation to making the decisions, having looking at that bigger objective. which we were talking about before, and the objective was to make it cohesive. So how do we do that? And you come in and made that decision of mixing the teams up, which created that cohesiveness. Another point that I wanted to bring forward as well is we're talking about from like a business leader making a decision. But what if you're not in the position of the decision maker, but you're in a situation where the leader isn't making a decision? Now, from my perspective, I've found that happens quite a lot. Well, from my life experience, I've been in those situations where the leader won't make a decision, so you're floundering around going, what are we doing? And so for what I've learned from those situations is that you can actually take control a little bit with that decision-making process. And I still have that at the moment with some clients that I work with. We'll be sitting around having the meeting, and there'll be a number of things to do. And the boss, one particular client, there's two people in charge, and they'll be going, oh. And so what I do is I put it as a question. I say, well, can we do this? And I make it like it's a firm decision, but putting it to a question, giving a specific direction. Can we do this? And then that leaves them with the ability to go, oh yes, let's do that. And that happens quite regularly now, where I say, can we do X, Y, Z? And I go, yes, let's do that. And then it sort of leads them to making a decision. So what I wanted to highlight there is you don't have to be the decision maker. You can actually help lead that process as well. Have you guys dealt with that much as in your experience?
Yes, very much so. Where you it's almost like they're asking you to make the decisions for them sometimes, where they're just not committed, or they're disengaged, or whatever that reason is, and you've almost got to take the bull by the horns, where you step up. And sometimes when you do that, you're not playing with fire, but I've also seen it, you do that, and then the leader sort of mysteriously wakes up and goes, what are you doing? So, well, we need to make a decision, and we're doing this. You didn't check with me. I didn't. Well, okay, well, we'll just stop doing that. What would you like to do? Sometimes they make a decision then, which is a reactive decision. And other times they go, yeah, all right, fair enough, or keep doing what you're doing. So, and you could almost argue that they're kind of like, the future leaders that are starting to break the ice and bust through. And that's what happens.
It's difficult to lead the leader, isn't it? Without stepping on their toes and making them uncomfortable. But sometimes, as Damien said, it's a bit like the Sun Tzu art of war. Sometimes you just got to lead them with a soft hand without them feeling that hand.
That point you mentioned there, Pete, of soft hand is correct. I find deference, showing of respect in how you do things. And you can do that in a number of ways. And I use, can we do this? Or we can say, I'm sorry, but could we do it this way? And using that deference, to showing of respect in how you're doing it, I find that makes a big difference, because that it's almost putting it to them going, well, I think we should do this, but you're the boss, but this is my suggestion. And I find that makes a big difference in how you do it. It's not what you say, it's how you say it makes a huge difference in that regard.
Yeah, molding, it's a really good point, and I've done that before. We say, just a thought, exactly what you said, and then you can let them flip it around so they think it's their decision. So you don't let your ego get involved. And sometimes if it's a good decision, they'll take credit for it. But everyone knows, and even that leader or that person knows that, if they don't acknowledge you for that decision-making process, they're just cheating themselves, really. But having the ability not to emotionally take control of that, saying, you actually lower yourself to that person. So, but suggesting, and it's up. And then the other thing you can say, I think we should do this, but it's up to you what you want to do. So you're leaving the final decision-making process to them. So you're not putting them in a corner. There's still an exit for them, but often that can also push those decision processes along.
Isn't that the art of negotiation? Letting someone else think that your idea is theirs?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
As long as there's the sarcasm is at a very minimal low, people see through that.
Yeah, well, that's a big one. Being, and I've got that with a client at the moment. As a leader, they do things, but they can be quite sarcastic from time to time, and it really demoralises a team. So, as a decision, I think stay away from, especially as a leader, stay away from sarcasm, those kind of detrimental type behaviours. It really demoralises the team and doesn't work very well. I would steer away from those things. And also, too, going up the chain, sarcasm definitely doesn't work. I mean, as a parent, when you've got a child and a child's sarcastic to you, just like,
yeah.
So in that regard, I mean, decision making itself, it looks like really what we need to do is, if we're going to sum this up, is have a clear idea of what the overall objective, what you're trying to achieve is, and then from that assess the situation against all the different options against that objective to see which best works, and decide on that and assess it as we're going, and then move back the other way. Does that kind of sum it up? Is there any other takeaways you'd like to add into that?
I think that sums it up pretty well. Making the decision, quick decisions at times. And I think the other thing that is the magnitude or what's the impactfulness of the decision. If the decision goes haywire, what's the impact of that decision to a business? So you're making a decision over a $10 million project, and if that fails, it's going to cost the business $10 million, or is it a decision over what type of coffee the staff wants in the kitchen? I know that's two extremes, but weighing up the impact of the decision is also pretty important of how and when those decisions are made.
Yeah, I agree, Julian. The honesty one for me is a big one. Honesty and real. If your employees see that you're that sort of person, that you work within those strict guidelines, those parameters, boundaries, but they're bendable as well, and there's precedence of how you've acted before and what's worked and what hasn't worked. So again, it's being that good leader, and again, that emotional intelligence throughout that process is really important.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So that's our show today, how to make effective decisions and what are the key components in relation to that. This has been Exceptional Effort Business Sunday. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks, Damien. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks.